1977 was a banner year for classic rock, and in this episode, we're turning our attention to a band that finally put it all together to give us an instant classic. Welcome to The Grand Illusion. Stay with us. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Another great episode. I say it every episode, but because they're great, Eric. I mean,
Yes.
It's like a broken record, but, you know.
Hey,
Truth
nothing
hurts.
wrong with that.
Truth hurts, like they say.
The truth hurts.
Truth hurts. Deal with it.
But, well, I don't know. This episode has an interesting we're talking about.
Yeah,
is this the grand illusion? No.
Is it?
No,
I think everything is a grand illusion.
No.
But we're going to find out. If it's your first time here, welcome aboard. We're so happy to have you, so grateful to have you. Hopefully you'll stay with us going forward, and you can go check out the back catalog is always there. If you're listening on your favorite podcast provider, go ahead and swipe, give us a review, 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever the max is, we'll take it. Whatever you've got to give, we will take from you. So give us the best review you can, because I guarantee you by the end of this episode, we will have earned it. We're working hard here behind these microphones to bring you the best, what we believe is the best in music and movie podcasting every single week. That's the spiel, Eric.
That is the spiel. And it's
okay.
a fine spiel.
Now I'm going to bring the energy down a little bit. That was the
No, you should be excited about this one. This is a
that
good
was the
one.
used car salesman.
It's a good one.
Pitch.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. It was kind of, Now we can introduce our guest, and sitting in our third chair. I guess we can call it like the third chair when we have like only one. When we have one guest on, we'll call it the third chair from now on. How does that sound, Eric?
Sure.
I just came up with that. Just kind of like in our third chair.
Very officious.
The third chair. Yeah.
Third chair. Okay. So in our third chair, from parts unknown, but we know where he is, but we're not going to tell you, Mr. Christopher Clark.
Hey, what's up, guys? Good to be on. I'm looking forward to
Always
this
a
one.
pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
How are you?
I'm doing well,
How are
man.
you?
I'm excited to talk about the grand illusion.
I do have to say, yeah, I have to say, since you've been becoming a guest and sitting in on a lot of episodes, I have to say our prog leanings have increased. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Maybe it's revealing to me some of the things that I used to listen to, right? We did Asia, which I asked to do, which was a big kind of proggy album. With Styx, we're talking about the Styx album, The Grand Illusion, and we'll get into the stats in one moment. But in interviews, Dennis DeYoung always says, "I don't know what prog means. I don't know what that is. Why are you calling us that?" Well, you know what? Let's try and look at it from Dennis DeYoung's side tonight, if we can. We'll give it a try. I was thinking about it earlier when I was listening to it, and I was thinking about what he said, and I was trying to think about, well, what is his point of view then on this kind of stuff, and what is he? Is he approaching this from a different set of eyes? And obviously, he must be, because everybody else in the world thinks that this is a type of music.
Honestly, when I listen to it, and and before, I know I'm cutting you off from doing the stats, but when I heard it, I was only like a greatest hits guy with Styx for a very long time, and then when you said, do you want to do this one, I said, you know what, this will be a reason to do a deep dive. And when I listened to it, it wasn't so much that I thought he was prog. I said, I feel like Dennis DeYoung was like the Andrew Lloyd Webber of rock and roll. Like the whole vibe of the record. He was very theatrical, more so theatrical than proggy in my point of view.
Well, but those are elements. Eric will let me do the stats, because you started us off on a good foot. But let me get the stats out of the way, and then I'll kick it over to Eric, and he probably knows where I'm going with Peter Gabriel and Genesis. And theatricality. We'll leave it there. So the stats, here we go. If you're new to the show, in the beginning we give you some factual information, and then we get to the opinion. But here we go. This was released on July 7th, 1977. It was released on 7/7/77. They did that on purpose because they felt they needed a good luck charm. So they went for the 3 7s, just like you get in a jackpot, and it worked. The album was produced by Styx. There were 2 singles released: Come Sail Away, hit number 8, and Fooling Yourself, hit number 29. Hit number 6 on Billboard. Very nice, gentlemen. And 3 times platinum. That's over 3 million copies sold. Stats say 6 million, somewhere around there, but we'll take 3 million in 1977, and let me bookmark 1977, because we'll get to that a little as well. But let me pick up where Chris left off, Eric, about theatricality and progressive rock. I think they're not, those aren't exclusive terms to each other. I don't think one excludes the other, right?
Yeah, certain bands certainly leaned into that. With early Genesis, Gabriel used to wear costumes, and that was the whole sort of shtick. And then the whole dynamic of that band changed when Phil took over. But even he, in the early days, would don a hat or put on a coat and with a little lamp and like say "It's all right, Joe" with a glass of whiskey and tell a story. It's basically just sort of, and the music lent that to what they were doing. Certainly, they were singing about you know whatever creatures in the woods
A
or
typical prog.
or the apocalypse, or it wasn't just everyday rock and roll, like sort of every man kind of falling in love kind of stuff, or at least that it wasn't at that time. But
But overall, there's that theatricality, right? In all these groups, even in Pink Floyd, the level of theatricality might be different than other ones, but there's.
I think Floyd it was a more visual like experience, multi sort of visual and audio experience. They really didn't deviate.
That's still a theatrical aspect, right? I mean,
sure,
they reveal themselves in different ways is the point I'm trying to make. But I think that overall, that since there's that kind of bombast and that improvisational aspect to the really heavy prog rock, there's got to be some theatricality
They're
to it.
Putting on a show, and to Chris's point, but I think there is maybe a little bit of a difference in the approach that DeYoung takes, in the sense where he's the great showman. He is, it's like a musical. Mm-hmm. It's more so than him actually telling a story. I mean, even though he would write concept albums, so they did have by the time they got to Kilroy Was Here, it was a heavy concept. But I think he presented himself as this sort of like almost using rock and roll as a means to kind of really lean into that sort of like maestro type of thing, where he's mm-hmm. very much front and center and
like a ringleader
and giving a show. But and the voice and the music matched that. Whereas, it wasn't a lot of like, heavy instrumental type of stuff. And Chris, you had
in a different way.
Yeah. I was going to say, but what I took away from it is like a lot of those bands like Floyd and Genesis or any of those other prog bands, it was more the show lent itself to that. But what I'm saying is when I hear it, I don't necessarily hear it in the music. Like I can detach the show from the music. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Styx, that Broadway maestro theater type vibe comes through the music mm-hmm. as much as it does through whatever mm-hmm. their show was. Like where I feel like with those other bands, it was more the show and the music could be separated. Mm-hmm. Whereas this, it's almost like they're linked together. That's what I took away from it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally. Dennis DeYoung is a singular voice in rock and roll, mm-hmm. Often overlooked because of the trajectory they took. Eric mentioned concept albums. I would put forward that in doing my research, this is a concept album.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paradise Theater is a concept album, and 100%. Kilroy Was Here as a concept album. So they went really heavy on and that was Dennis, and that lends itself to Chris. What you're saying about theatricality and an overarching story and all that parts of it, because Dennis DeYoung did go to Broadway eventually. He did Hunchback of Notre Dame, and he did some other Broadway stuff later in his career. So it matches with what you took away from it.
I was just about to say that. I was thinking when you consider everything today is a musical. I mean, movies are now a thing. Back to the Future and just weird Minority Report's a fucking musical. Like what? And it's mind-boggling. But when you consider what he was doing then, it almost like ahead of its time a little bit, because it's rock and roll, but it's, you know what I mean? But he's presenting it as if it were like that kind of thing. So
I mean, Paradise Theater is like primed to be like a Broadway show. I mean, I know we're talking about Grand Illusion, but you think about Paradise Theater, it would lend itself so nicely to being a Broadway musical. Just that whole theme of that record.
Yeah. I'm surprised no one has approached Styx about that, because they've got one of those musical catalogs that can be adapted into some type of a story, a la Billy Joel and Moving Out and all those things. They can pull all it together, and like Chris said, there's a level of theatricality that's already built into Styx, because of Dennis and the way he presents, and yeah, you hear it come through on the, especially on Grand Illusion, on the song Grand Illusion and Superstars. He's almost like a carnival barker or a circus ringman kind of at the end when he's like, yes, yes, superstars, like he's kind of barking, like kind of like calling out, almost like he's calling out to people at a carnival, like come in and see, that type of theatricality.
And even the way the album closes.
You said the way, it's built into Styx. I think the rest of the band would probably beg to differ. It was most likely built into Dennis DeYoung, being
I think they were okay
more or less
at
the time, sure, but I think they kind of got a little tired of it, which is where I think some of the problems started. There was, because he kept, like you say, I mean, each album became a thing, right? It became a concept.
More and more.
It always kind of called back to this and Paradise Theater, because even Kilroy was here. They were in the abandoned paradise. It took place in the actual Paradise Theater, in the story. So it's interesting that he, and it's kind of cool, actually. I always thought it was,
he made his own universe.
An amazing show. I mean, that when we saw them on, that was our first exposure to Styx on that. And I thought it was brilliant, but
instant fans, people didn't get it at the time.
So it wasn't a jump the shark moment the way JY and Tommy Shaw would lead one to believe.
For them, it might have been. For me, it was my second concert ever.
We didn't see anything like it. They had a movie before it. It was, this was like big budget stuff. We're not talking like some cheap. This was like we're watching an actual film.
This was the Kilroy was here for.
Kilroy was and as soon as like it, they had in the movie on the screen, you had Dennis DeYoung and Tommy Shaw meeting, because Tommy Shaw plays like the rebel and Dennis DeYoung is like, he's Kilroy and he's escaped from this, whatever the story is. But they leave right at that moment where they meet in the theater, the screen goes up and then, the stage presentation picks up right where the movie leaves off. And there's really talking. Cool. It was really, and then they put on and they're reminiscing. He's going back and talking about how the way they played their last show at the Paradise, and like it was, and then that's when the police come in.
And then Styx kind of takes over, like they were having memories of what happened that night.
Right.
So then the Styx concert kind of takes over.
And that's
what it becomes. And then there'll be some other little vignettes in between of acting. Now, they Tommy Shaw and the other guys hated that. They're like, this is the worst thing ever. We saw it in a very they just to wrap this up, Styx first toured the Kilroy concept
theaters.
In a set of small theaters.
Theaters, yeah.
Then they took it out into giant stadiums where it did not translate, because you've got a like giant stadium of 70,000 people watching these people perform. It didn't carry over, but seeing it in a venue like the City Center in Manhattan, which was very small, it was like going to see a play. It was like going to see Styx perform a play because it was so small. Now I walked out the next day and started buying Styx cassettes because I didn't realize how much stuff I knew by them. So that kind of speaks to the theatricality of the music and the maybe the bombast, the
great
majesty of it, the pomp, like the pomp, and I don't mean pomp like pompous, but the like the pomp and circumstance, like their music had more of a majestic feel to it.
Yeah.
Even in their deepest prog. Now let's talk for a minute. This album came out in 1977.
Yeah.
Before we dive in, let's talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
A huge year for rock and roll. I'm gonna rattle off just some of them. Okay, we got the Big Daddy, of course. Rumors by Fleetwood Mac.
Mm-hmm.
Asia by Steely Dan. Animals by Pink Floyd. Sex Pistols burst onto the scene. Nevermind the Bollocks.
Mm-hmm.
Heroes by David Bowie. Exodus by Marley. The Clash. Low by David Bowie. The Stranger by Billy Joel. Slow Hand by Clapton. Lust for Life, Iggy Pop. Out of the Blue, ELO. Bat Out of Hell, Meatloaf. Talking Heads, 77. Street Survivors, Skinner. News of the World, Queen. Running on Empty, Jackson Browne. Let There Be Rock. Farewell to Kings by Rush, the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
Love Gun by Kiss. All in All, Earth, Wind and Fire, Book of Dreams, Steve Miller Band. Of course, Grand Illusion, I, Robot by Alan Parsons, Heavy Weather by Weather Report.
That's a great album.
There was just, Gabriel's, one of Gabriel's solo albums. The Jam started to emerge also. Foreigner's first album.
That's
like
crazy.
I said in the open, this was like I don't know if this is beyond Hall of Fame, like for what was coming out in 77.
It's so diverse.
Like it was just so diverse, and a lot of those, and you see with the rise of Saturday Night Fever soundtrack that things started to turn, and with Fleetwood Mac. So it's curious that an album that's kind of like this, still was able to make a dent, and like I said, they really on the back of Come Sail Away.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and because that song kind of takes you. And yet it has all the great changes that a great prog song should have. It starts slow, it's melodic, it's just little sort of ballad, then then there's that tremendous bridge, then the hard rock kicks in, and then they go back to the it's an amazing track and very sentimental. And I think I read a story though that Dennis DeYoung was actually kind of depressed when he wrote it, and it's such a a song that is like promotes, such joy and optimism and, in a time, but I guess he just wasn't feeling. So he wrote it, and yet it became one of their biggest hits. So there it is. But
yeah,
Chris,
I got some more background on that, but I'll kick it over to Chris first.
Well, I was gonna say from what I was reading, a lot of his funk and like depression kind of permeated through the record. Like they expected the previous record, which I think it's Crystal Ball. They expected it to do a lot better once Tommy Shaw joined the band, and then it didn't. It did better than Equinox, but not what they wanted it to do. So he was still kind of in a funk. So a lot of the writing is built around his disillusionment with rock and roll, and all their disillusionment, and even though some of the issues that they're dealing with success. And then even Tommy Shaw, some of his writing, Angry Young Man, he wrote that song. It's about Dennis DeYoung not being satisfied with where the band was. So it's definitely something that influenced this record pretty significantly.
Yeah. So what had happened is Styx was, before they signed to A&M, before they had their major label debut, which would be with Crystal Ball. They were, they were on Wooden Nickel Records. Not that makes a difference, but there's what's called the Wooden Nickel era, when they were kind of making The Serpent is Rising and Man of Miracles, and the stuff was really about that, really about about castles and moats and, catapults and all that kind of stuff. Anyway,
really prog.
They in 74, or 74, 73, they released a song called Lady.
Yeah.
Nothing came of it. It kind of came and went. It wasn't until about 2 years later that all of a sudden radio stations started picking up on Lady, and it became a hit well after the album it was on came out. So at that point, that was like 75 or so. So what Chris is alluding to about Dennis DeYoung being in a funk is he thought that because Lady took off, they were poised, like they thought that Equinox was going to really kind of go, sail on the back of the popularity of Lady, and it didn't. And then, John Cyrulewski left the band at that point. He was an original Styx member. They get Tommy Shaw. They released Crystal Ball, which is a good album. It's very short. There's not a whole lot on it, but it didn't really have the impact that Dennis was feeling. Yeah, which leads to the great life is this is all an illusion, because once and he all but says it in his lyrics is, when you get what you want, it doesn't make a difference, because you're still you, and you still have the problems that you basically have. And James Young said it too. He kind of says, once we got popular, I was still me. Nothing changed. I still had all the problems I had. I still had, like, success didn't change that. It may have changed other things, but whatever issues I had were still there. So this whole thing of them thinking that when they quote unquote made it, it would change their lives. It really didn't. And that's where, and that also, like you said, with Tommy Shaw, with Fooling Yourself, he said, when I, met Dennis, I'm like, this guy just seemed like he was so down, but there's, he didn't understand what was going on with that, and that's where fooling yourself. I thought it was, but then Tommy Shaw said in later years, he goes, now when I look back on it, because I think it was more about me. As at the time I thought it was about Dennis, but then when I look back, it's actually kind of a little autobiographical. But you can see, and even JY's song "Miss America" is about the blatantly about the notion of status, about Miss America. It's like, we love your body in that photograph. Your home state must be proud. Like, it's literally about things that we look at, as an image.
Yeah.
But what's behind it, or how does that person feel to be looked at as just as an image? So there's a lot of through lines in this album about that, about isolation and the notion of what success might be.
You wouldn't know it though, musically.
Yeah.
You mentioned
bombast.
You mentioned, this sort of soaring vocals, the back, it's funny how the best kind of music is the music that is sad. It's hard to write a happy tune. I guess, I mean, because like I said, I mean, you lyrically, yes, you do take those things away from it, but just musically, I don't know. It has a different vibe, than I think some of their other stuff, and even the later stuff that came, they started writing songs that did reflect the sadness and the things like that. Like on Paradise Theater, it's more sentimental and
cynical. I dare say a little cynical.
Yes. But this album, I don't hear that. I hear, I don't know, just I hear a show. I hear that is the sort of, and like you said, Dennis is the ringleader, and he's sort of gathering all that. So I think it's it's very deceptive, is what I guess sort of what I'm trying to say, in that sense. But
Come Sail Away became Eric. It became an instant classic. This wasn't one that kind of grew.
Yeah,
like right out of the gate, Come Sail Away was on FM radio. It just transcended. It went right into that upper echelon of like classic rock songs. Like it hit the pantheon pretty quick.
Sure.
Like tailor made for arenas. It was just like one of those songs that where everything came together, like Eric said, with the different movements, but it's hard rocking. I mean, that middle breakdown is guitar. It is not keyboards. It is JY and it is Tommy Shaw really going to town with the guitars and really bringing out the rock elements in it. So it's got the piano and that kind of stuff in the beginning, but then transitions into a straight like rock anthem. Chris, hand it over to you.
One of the things that you would definitely notice about prog from the 70s that came from America, the biggest difference that and I've noticed this even with, and I'm not going to go off on a tangent about them, but like Kansas and Styx, they're prog, but they rock a whole lot harder than those bands from England. Like there's definitely that element. Like JY is a rock guitar player. Like that riff in Miss America is undeniable, and it'd be at home in any other hard rock band's album, which you would not necessarily get with some of the more famous prog bands that come from across the pond.
No, I agree. England has a more sort of, very English approach. We're talking like sort of like Baroque, classical, a lot of those kinds of flourishes. Even in their heavier stuff, it's still kind of, has that little, influence there. But you're right, Chris. I mean, rock definitely has, even when we talked about Meatloaf, the same thing, right? He kind of projected that sort of theatricality, and his out and Bat Out of Hell has that, and it's even, I would dare say, even jazzier than something like this. There's a lot of like that kind of vibe to it. So the saxophones and the things like that. But the American sort of like, I guess you could say the flamboyancy of American music is different than, I would say, because with English bands, it's more reserved and more, they're sort of like, they give off that sort of more pompous vibe. But, with American bands, it's just sweaty rock and roll, and they could do some brilliant stuff, right? I mean, there's some, brilliant, some, it's not just playing, simple music. I mean, they could do some real brilliance, but it is much more hard rocking. So that's America.
And you brought up, Chris, you mentioned Kansas, which fits into Grand Illusion because Tommy Shaw went to a Kansas concert around this time, and he said he was blown away by the presentation of how Kansas kind of presented their thing. And that kind of inspired him to write Man in the Wilderness, oddly enough. Man in the Wilderness is kind of about, it's about his brother coming back from Vietnam. It's about a couple of things, but he just kind of took the grandiose nature of what he saw at a Kansas concert and kind of internalized it. And so it's interesting that you brought them up. And then JY he's an outlier because he's a rock and roll guy. You know what, Eric, you know what came to me after how many years of listening to Styx?
Yeah.
When I listened to Miss America today, I listened to it a couple of times, I'm like, this guy is kind of like the Bob Seger of Styx. Right? He's
That's really appropriate.
He's like the rock. Like within Styx, his songs are always rock and roll, right? Like Great White Hope, he's also the George Harrison. He usually gets like one cut, but it's always like a rock song. He does not write these epic songs with all these different things to them. They're generally guitar centric and they're hard rocking. And so when I was listening to Miss America, I'm thinking of his voice. I'm thinking they're from Chicago. I'm like, he's kind of Seegerish in his in the role that he occupies within Styx. He's not, like Rush. It seems like everybody in Rush is on the same page.
Yeah,
but with Styx, it seems like Dennis is kind of like the showman. JY is the grungy guitar player,
and Tommy's kind of in between.
He's got a pretty voice, and he kind of does the acoustic stuff. Like there was a place for everybody, and when you mix it all together, you got.
But I like that. I mean, that was always the thing that we loved about the band, wasn't it? Who's your favorite? What's your favorite? Part of Styx?
Because they were different.
1/3, because they were all distinctly different. They all had a different voice. They all had, I mean, JY had that weird sort of, deep vocal all the time. Almost like he would overdo it sometimes, like, like just for effect, right? So I mean, it was, but yeah, I mean, but when they sang together, it was some brilliant harmonies and things like that. When they did meet on that same page, like in certain songs, yeah. But I mean, it was like some of its parts, yeah.
I actually wrote that down about their harmonies. I think when we talked about Paradise Theater, we really talked about the harmonies, and I don't think they're as coalesced on this album as they would get to be. Like, I still think they were good, but they were still a little. I don't think they found the blend yet. By the time you got to Cornerstone, when they really kind of did the right turn into pop, like you really, those harmonies became thicker and fuller, and just. I don't know if it's a different production method or what they were doing, but this one, on this album, they're there, but they're a little bit rougher, right? And it's not as Eaglesy or Fleetwood Mackie where everything just kind of sounds really harmonious.
I think it's decidedly more Anthem, right? I mean, backing vocals are all kind of singing and projecting that big vocal, then getting it out there.
Yeah, you're right.
The harmony is they would get better as they went along, for sure. But
I think it's. And then you get stuff like, like I said, tried to like put myself in Dennis DeYoung's shoes and see what he was seeing. But you have a song like Castle Walls. I'm sorry, that's proggy. It's about once you start talking about castles and we're not really going to be able to. You're not going to really be able to make a case to me. Now, if we go to Cornerstone, I can say, none of this is prog. Even if there's instrumentals in there, it is something different. But when you've got Men in the Wilderness and then Castle Walls together, and they're great songs again. And you know what? If this type of music isn't your thing, stay for Dennis DeYoung's voice. Like that. That's the whole thing. Yeah, it's Tommy's,
Tommy's
come sail. What's that?
I said Tommy's too.
What's
honestly.
that, Chris?
Tommy's too as well.
Yeah.
Tommy's voice is phenomenal too.
Yeah, on Fooling Yourself, he's really belting it.
I love it. Yeah,
he really goes for it. But and maybe that speaks to what Chris is saying, is that because Dennis is such a showman, or he's got a great understanding of his instrument, his vocal instrument. Right? He really knows how to use it. That you can listen to something as corny as Castle Walls just for his performance, because he's so great at singing.
Yeah.
That it's like, yeah, I could listen to him sing the Papa John's menu. And I'd
Yeah.
probably be okay with it. It'd be all right.
The funny thing about Dennis DeYoung too is like he comes off as the sort of like you say, the corny. Even later on, he'd get it even more corny with Gilroy was. I mean, and yet to hear the man talk off the record, like it's like he's Chicago, like he's dropping F-bombs. It's like he's like heavy accent. He's like, it does not give off the same kind. You would think he's more sort of like rough and tumble, but he's decidedly sings some, dare I say, some dainty shit, but like you say, his voice is so unique. It doesn't. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but yet you love it. Like, even like the solo stuff, like Desert Moon and things like that. Like, yeah, I mean, but it's like, it's a great word, Chris, schmaltzy, but it definitely, he knows what he's doing, I think, in terms of how the vocal range that he has, and the pitch to his voice and the I don't know what it is, but I don't think I've never heard anybody sound even remotely like him in the annals of rock. I mean, he's very unique.
Yeah, and I would easily put him in my top 5 or top 10 vocalists. I absolutely would. I mean, he's so underrated, and if Chris, if you go down the rabbit hole and you listen to stuff like Sweet Madam Blue,
that
Queen of Spades, somebody,
Sweet Madam Blue is one of my favorite Styx songs. Like I said, I got this double record when I was in college, and that song I kept playing over and over again. And there's actually, what I was going to say is, elements of that song I feel like made their way into Castle Walls. Like I felt like there are parts of Castle Walls that very much reminded me of Sweet Madam Blue. But and as far as Dennis DeYoung schmaltz and like some of that cheesiness is concerned and all that stuff, I don't think he went too far. I think he had just the right amount on this record. Like, I don't think, like, later on when you get into like Crystal Ball with songs like Babe, or like maybe some people thought Kilroy was like a little bit too much and all that stuff. But I feel like here it was tempered. It was tempered and balanced by the other guys being who they were, and it didn't like dominate the record, which is what I think makes it work. It's like it's there and it's very clear that it's there, but it's not overpowering the other things that make the band so cool.
Well, eventually it would come to that. I think this album, and then after this was Pieces of Eight,
which is a great record,
which is
too.
very underrated because it kind of flies under the radar, but it's got Blue Collar Man on there, and it's got Renegade, and it's got a whole bunch of other stuff.
It's like a sister record to this one. It has a similar vibe.
A song called Lords of the Ring. Okay.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know what you think you're trying to sell me here.
Oh, they're just trying to squeeze the remnants of that out. I mean, for sure. I mean, it's he can. I don't know if he's playing dumb or he's just trying to be like kind of really snarky about it. That I don't know what you're talking about, but the album after this would kind of decidedly end that. They would. It would be like a new band would emerge with their album after that, and that's where the stuff began. So this kind of stuff hit like this was still like they had the rock and roll cred, and like I said, when we talked about the albums from '77, they fit right in there. This was not like, oh, this was like a lucky thing, or how did this pop? How does this pop band get in there? No, this album can run, like Eric said, with Meatloaf. It can run side by side with Foreigner's debut album of that year. I mean, this is like firmly entrenched in that genre of music that was selling out stadiums, that people would just go to these concerts to, right? And that would fill the arenas. But to this point, Styx hadn't had the big. I'm sure they were popular and probably more so locally in the in that Chicago area, but Grand Illusion put them over. For all they're trying, and maybe that's where Dennis started to see, well, you know what? There's gold in them hills if we kind of make things just like all the other ones. We've said it 1,000 times that, once they see like, if you make it a little poppier, shorten it up a little bit, because the Lady was like the outlier. All of a sudden, Lady was a throwaway song, and then it became a hit. And I was reading there, it's considered like the first power ballad, Lady. Makes
sense.
From
72 or 73. And if you listen to Lady, it's just like that builds up into that whole crescendo of classic Styx. So, Chris, did you have something?
Nope. I was gonna say when you
Oh,
think of Lady, one thing I think about with Lady is I can't get out of my head now is it's tied to the movie Old School when they're singing it at the
yeah,
wedding and he drops in all the F bombs. So I can't think
yeah,
of the chorus of that song without saying fucking lady.
yeah.
Yeah.
The good news about classic rock is that a lot of like people our age, like that became movie stars, like Will Ferrell and
Mhm.
Billy Madison, Adam Sandler, like those kind of guys. They like to put that music into movies, which is great because it gets the exposure. But then if it's used a certain way, it's much like Reservoir Dogs with Stuck in the Middle. It's forever going to be associated with something else.
Somebody getting
Mhm.
their ear cut off.
And it kind of like, oh, you can't listen to Lady. I can't listen to Stuck in the Middle with you without thinking Reservoir Dogs, or I can't think of Billy Squire, I think The Stroke, without thinking about Billy
Billy
Madison when he's
Madison.
standing in front of the Trans Am, and at school, and so
Yeah.
there's all it's kind of a blessing and a curse because
And
you get
Styx went through
exposed to
that.
it.
Well, they also try to make it relatable too. I think, with how certain people grew up and, hanging out, beer drinking, this music was on the radio at the time. A lot of this kind of stuff kind of reflects that, I think, but, but it's definitely needle drop, but I think it's more, so that's the kind of stuff I like is when it's not used out of context. It's very much a part of,
Yeah,
of the scene, or of the lifestyle, so
hmm
yeah. Yep.
And
kind
Styx
of like Dazed and
Renaissance.
Confused.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
Styx had a big renaissance like that too in the late '90s. Like the car commercial, they were in South Park. They were on that show Freaks and Geeks. Like their music,
Yeah.
they had a big run. It was almost like they had that run until '83. Everybody forgot about them, and then like suddenly like all these like people in Hollywood remembered them, and and that's when they started their reunion with for the brief time with Dennis
Mm.
DeYoung. So that really did kind of give that band a whole new life that they didn't have before, which is I think what JY and Tommy are still touring on to a degree.
Yeah, yeah. They had gotten stamped with the quote unquote corporate rock label in the late '70s,
Hmm.
which was like the kiss of death. No one even really knows what that means, but like Journey and a couple of other bands that were like, "Oh, this is corporate rock. It's not real rock and roll." And
Yeah.
that kind of like was almost like a poison pill to people. It's like, "Oh, you listen to Styx, that's corporate rock, man. It's not Zeppelin or what, so it became like what I remember people used to say, I'm like, what? Like I was young. I'm like, what the fuck is corporate rock? It's like, what they work for IBM? Like, I don't understand like
Yeah.
what you're saying. Like, what do you mean? But it became this term that was used as a derogatory thing, and that carried through. And then Styx kind of almost lived up to whatever that thing means as they progressed and as they got to Kilroy Was Here. By that time, most people were done with them.
Hmm.
And like I said, and then absence makes the heart grow fonder. So as they left, and then 10, 12, 15 years later, oh my God, remember Mr.
Yeah.
Roboto? Remember that weird song, Mr. Roboto? And then all of
Yeah.
a
And
sudden
then
a
next
movie
thing you
star wants
know,
to play in their
it's
film.
in
Yeah.
like
Volkswagen.
every other TV show with,
Yeah, the Volkswagen.
buddies, about the 80s, and they're, reminiscing and they're singing it in the car and, all that kind of stuff. And yet, back in the day, it's like it's hated. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny how things
Yeah.
work that
Just
way,
like with Sam J. Jones and Ted, right? Everybody
Yeah.
used to make fun of Flash Gordon. We loved the geeks, Eric and I. We loved Flash Gordon, and
Oh,
then
oh
when
yeah,
I saw Ted in the theater, I'm like, and then Sam J. Jones and the whole Flash Gordon subplot, I'm
that
like,
was hilarious.
now it's okay. But when I loved it in 1980, it was not okay.
No, we
I
got
was a
beaten up
kid.
for it.
Yeah, I was a kid, but now it's cool to like Flash Gordon.
Yeah,
So.
because we couldn't like Star Wars and
All
stuff.
right, let me take a step. I have to come down from my soapbox.
But
There you go.
yeah,
Okay, rant over.
no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And they even went even further, and they released physical copies of Flash Gordon and Ted together. Like
Together,
it was like a two
Did they
pack
really?
Blu-ray with both, yeah, together, like
Get your education.
as a marketing thing. Like yeah, bizarre,
Get
but
your
yeah,
get your movie education. So,
yeah.
I didn't say this in the beginning, but we've got Three Lies and a Truth for Styx. I've got a Styx edition.
I was hoping you would.
I was wondering about
Yeah,
that too.
yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
didn't go away. It didn't go away. It's circumstantial. The all the cosmic tumblers have to fall into place for there to be a good Three Lies and a Truth. And for
Mm.
Styx, We've got a 3 lies and a truth. I've got it set up. I've got it ready. I think now's a good time to do it. So let's go ahead and do this. For anybody that's new, this is a sometimes segment. It pops up every so often. We like to, this way it's even more special. So we're going to do 3 lies and a truth, and you can play at home. So I'm going to read off 4 statements. 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, are fake. 1 of them is true. And these 2 gentlemen and you at home will have the opportunity to figure out which one is the true statement amongst the 3 other lies. You can let us know on social media how you did. So we're going to do this. I'm going to read off the 4 statements, and we'll have Christopher go first, since he's the budding Styxite.
Yeah, I definitely know. I definitely know the least about Styx out of the 3 of us, for sure.
Good. Good. Sauce for the goose, Mr. Savick. Thank you, Eric.
Great. I was just thinking about those movies today, man. That's awesome.
Little Trek 2, never hurt anybody. It's always good to throw in there.
Mm-hmm.
I got caught with my britches down. I did nothing of the sort.
Do we know what we're talking about, Chris?
Oh, my britches down.
Is that Star Trek 2?
Star Trek 2.
Of course. Yeah.
The Wrath of Khan.
Probably the most quotable.
Yes.
Khan. Anyway, all right.
Just a moment, Khan.
With the glasses.
You don't put Khan on hold when you want the Genesis. Just a moment, Khan.
Well, Kirk does. Yeah.
You are in a position to grant. I'm in a position to grant nothing. Anyway, here we go. 3 lies and a truth before we go too far afield, and that would be totally my fault. 4 statements. Here they come. 3 of them are lies. 1's true. Statement number 1. From 1972 to 1979, Styx released an impressive 10 studio albums, not including compilations. Number 2, Styx was the first band to be awarded 4 consecutive multi-platinum album awards by the RIAA. Number 3, if you go to a Styx show now, you will not hear Mr. Roboto. Number 4, Dennis DeYoung was originally considered for the Peter Frampton role of Billy Shears in the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band movie from 1978. Thankfully, he turned it down. If you remember, that movie had the Bee Gees in it.
Ruined Peter Frampton.
Earth, Wind, Fire. Yep.
Yeah, and all these other people were in it. It was just a disaster. So I'll run through them again one more time. 3 lies and a truth. 3 of these are false. 1's true. From 1972 to 1979, Styx released an impressive 10 studio albums, not including comps. Styx was the first band to be awarded 4 consecutive multi-platinum album awards by the RIAA. They do all the certifications. Number 3, if you go to a Styx show nowadays, you will not hear Mr. Roboto. They don't play it. Number 4, Dennis DeYoung was originally considered for the Peter Frampton part of Billy Shears, which was, this movie from 1978 in the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band film from 1978. Thankfully, he turned it down. Christopher Clark.
The 4 multi-platinum albums in a row.
Is that a lie or a truth?
That's a truth.
That's a truth. So you say Styx was the first band to be awarded 4 consecutive multi-platinum albums by the RIAA.
Yeah, am I looking for the truth or the lie? The
You're looking for the truth.
Right. So that's the one I think is the truth.
You think it's true. Okay. Eric, what do you think is true?
I'm going to go crazy here. And I'm gonna go number 4.
Number 4, Dennis DeYoung was originally considered for the Peter Frampton part of Billy Shears. Pepper, Let's Go Ben from 1978. Thankfully, he turned it down. He's theatrical. He's tailor-made for it. Let's see. At home, let us know how you did. Hopefully, you've even if you didn't get it, let us know what one you did pick, and if we stumped you, or you can play at home. So here we go. The first lie. If you go to a Styx show now, you will not hear Mr. Roboto. No, that's untrue. Up until 2018, they refused to play Mr. Roboto, and then they finally buckled and started to play Mr. Roboto. They were absolutely hard and fast. We do not do Roboto. We don't play that song. But Styx they would not be denied. The Styx fans are like, we need to hear it.
Yeah.
We need to hear it. So they started doing it. When I saw Dennis DeYoung solo a couple of years ago, he did it as well, and he actually still had the Roboto mask, and he would take it out. Oh, awesome. Anyway, that's the first lie. Second lie. Let's see. Second lie, from 1972 to 1979, Styx released an impressive 10 studio albums, not including compilations. That is not true, but they did release 8 albums.
Yeah.
So sometimes too, I mean, they were on a breakneck pace from 72 to 79. They just did not stop. It's like, I guess like a shotgun will hit something eventually, like it'll spray and you'll hit.
Yeah.
So I think they might have had that kind of philosophy of, if we just keep putting stuff out, we'll get a hit, which did work eventually. Okay, so we've got two statements left. Styx was the first band to be awarded 4 consecutive multi-platinum album awards by the RIAA. Dennis DeYoung was originally considered for the Peter Frampton part of Billy Shears in the Sgt. Pepper's film. We want the truth or we want the lie?
What do you say, Chris?
Let's get the last lie out of the way.
Okay.
Let's get the last lie out of the way. The final lie. Dennis DeYoung was not originally considered for the Peter Frampton part of Billy Shears and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Very sorry. Styx' true statement was the first band to be awarded 4 consecutive multi-platinum albums by the RIAA. Now, the reason for that is not because they were so great. It's because back in the day, the RIAA, when we do our stats and we say 3 times platinum, blah, 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 that's the certification from them. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, they didn't count anything above 500,000 copies. They just went to gold, and that was it. That's why it was called gold. It was like kind of, you made a gold record, and there was no thought or no talk of ever counting anything beyond that. So when the RIAA did decide to go to a platinum status, like I guess A&M or whoever, like submitted Styx first.
Mm-hmm.
So they were so it wasn't because they did them in order. It was like Styx was the first one, like with the application in. And I think it was like in 84 or whenever they are, whenever they started when they fixed that designation, Styx got the first 4 consecutive multi-platinum albums. 2 times or higher. So they weren't getting them at the time. It was after the fact when the RIAA decided to go to a platinum, multi-platinum kind of calculus.
Yeah, I remember that from behind the music.
Oh, see, behind the music. Chris, 1998 called.
Yeah, I know.
There you go.
Behind the music. Or did you learn it on pop-up video?
No, well, I remember that too. Pop-up video.
Pop-up video. Remember that?
I remember that. Those were pretty cool.
I do.
Yeah. Pop-up video. VH1 became cooler than MTV at some point. Like
absolutely did.
100%.
Like VH1 was like the light FM of like the sister station of MTV, but then all of a sudden VH1 became a lot cooler because
they were playing everything MTV played. At some point.
And they had VH1 had behind the music, so they had those great documentaries. It was really good to kind of see.
Those were great. The classic album series were great. I love those. Yeah.
You could say it was really having a great. And then now everything's Love Island, Flavor of Love, Power of Love, Color of Love. It's all
it's ridiculousness. That's one. That's like every time Kelly and I go somewhere, like that is our go-to thing when we're in a hotel. we'll just put on ridiculousness all night, and it's fucking 3-4 in the morning, and they're still playing it. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculousness. All right. As we close out, I don't know if we need to do we need to do top tracks on this? I mean, I think the first 5 on this are going to just, the first 5 are going to take you the rest of the way. You have Grand Illusion, you have Fooling Yourself, you have Superstars, which we didn't really talk about that much, but that's a really great song. Also very underrated from Tommy Shaw. Come Sail Away, and then Miss America. Those are the first 5 out of the gate, and there's only 8 songs on this, and the last song is less than 2 minutes. So I think if you kind of get through, you get through those 5 songs, the last 2 are kind of the prog, if we want to use that word, kind of the proggiest. They kind of, they don't flow as well as well as the first 5. Chris, is that a fair statement?
Honest, if I'm being honest, Man in the Wilderness, this is like the first time I really gave a huge dive to this record. Like I listened to it like I had it on loop for like the last 2 days, but Man in the Wilderness to me was like kind of, and it wasn't even so much because of its proggy elements. I was really blown away by like Tommy Shaw's vocal performance on it. It really impressed me. And I know what you're saying. It probably doesn't flow as well as those 5 because it's not, maybe doesn't have the same type of vibe, but it's just a really, really well done song. And the lyrical content about brother coming home from Vietnam and everything. I think it's a really, really moving and well done song. So to me, that like I know
Yeah.
we're not going to do standout tracks, but to me that was like a nice surprise track. Like I really dug that song.
You know what I think it is, Chris? I think the first 5 kind of build to a crescendo,
Yep.
Mhm.
and then the
Yep.
last 2 are a little bit more introspective,
Yeah, it's like
right?
the
And a
come
little
down.
bit more kind of
I
kind
dare,
of like
yeah,
right?
and I dare say that probably I would think Tommy Shaw is probably very proud of this of that song. I'd like
Yeah.
to think that anyway.
I wonder
I
if
don't
they
know if
do it
they do
live.
it in concert or not. Yeah, I was just about to say I don't think they ever did it with Dennis DeYoung. Maybe they do it in
No, but
their.
they did tour the Grand Illusion on its anniversary in
Oh, okay, so
2017.
they played the whole
They
album.
they did do
Yeah,
the whole album and I think Dennis did it also.
I'm
Okay.
sure he
Or
did.
did Dennis tour the Grand Illusion? They both might have toured the Grand Illusion on its was that 40th anniversary in 2017?
Hmm.
I think they both did the whole thing. So um, depends on who you want to hear sing more. If you want to hear more Dennis singing the stuff, you go so Dennis. If you wanted to hear
It's such an odd,
hear Tommy do it, then it was
so
Lawrence
bizarre that
Gowan.
Dennis DeYoung employs 2 guys to look like James Young and Tommy Shaw, and they did the same thing in Styx with Dennis DeYoung. I don't get it. I just don't get it. You know, come on, guys, get your shit
When,
together.
when
It
you
just,
when you can't when you
yeah,
can't handle the real thing, you get the
right. Yeah, it's just, it's bizarre, very
stand-in.
bizarre. Yeah,
It is very strange. Styx is a very curious band. We just recently talked about zombie bands.
yeah,
Yeah,
These guys don't qualify, but for some reason, just to kind of put a cap on it, there are plenty of people that say Styx is not Styx without Dennis DeYoung, but Styx is just as much Styx because it's got James Young, original member. It's got Tommy
Mhm.
Shaw. Chuck Panazzo plays occasionally the bass, but there is a fervent cadre of fans that are like Styx is not Styx without Dennis. Like it is him.
it's
He
his
is the
performance style.
that like
Well, dare I
that
say it's the voice. I mean, it's definitely that unique vocal right there. It's I can't think of the term sticks. When they went off on their own, I know nothing about what they've done post Dennis DeYoung. Like
yeah
I've never listened to any of the albums made by Tommy and JY. I don't know if it's good or not. At this point, I don't know. I don't even know if I care.
yeah
But I'm sure it is good music. But I'm just, it's not for me. I'm one of those people. I don't think it sticks without Dennis.
yeah. They, they,
So
they did try to recently their most recent Styx albums. One was called The Mission, and then the other was Crash of the Crown.
yeah,
They
yeah,
did try and return to the classic Styx sound, like they wanted, because that was
right.
always those two guys. That was always their problem. Is we're going too far into the light FM
Hmm.
thing. Dennis is really dragging us that way, and he's starting to exercise a little too much control.
Right.
Of and demands and counter demands. When I think when Cornerstone came out and they wanted to release that song First Time, which Eric will know, after Babe, which was another
Yeah.
ballad. Tommy Show's
Really
like, "You do
sappy,
this, I'm
right?
leaving."
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes,
Yeah.
"If you do this, it's too like this is too much in a row. We're gonna lose our rock audience." So
Yeah.
there was the faction of Tommy Shaw's trying to say, well, what is Styx really? What are we going to stay true to it? Where bands evolve, we know this. We've seen this in almost every episode we do. Most bands, except for AC/DC, evolve. they
Hmm.
they grow. For
Well,
better or for worse, they
for better
change.
or for worse.
Yeah,
Right.
for better or
Exactly.
for worse, they
Yep.
change into something else. Maybe the Stones are the only other one that doesn't.
Yep.
But this is just the nature of it, and the factions were pulling at each other. And you saw and as evidenced by Dennis's post Styx output, where he did go to Broadway, he did do Broadway shows, and
Hmm.
his stuff he really embraced that theatricality. And then the core of what Styx was left really wanted to go back to embracing the harder edges.
Yeah.
I guess you get the best of both worlds.
I
I
know one
suppose.
thing very very much like, and I get they're completely different bands and from two different eras, but like very much like Skid Row is like they're
Yeah,
Sebastian Bach is trying very hard to get them to do a reunion, any interview with
Yeah,
the
and they're
three
like,
guys
"Fuck
that are
you."
they're like, no fucking way. And that's the same thing. Dennis DeYoung, I don't know if he's still doing it, but I remember last year when he put out
He
his
is.
last album, he did a bunch of podcasts where he's like, come on, let's do this one last time. We're all at, we're at the point of no return if we don't do it now. And JY and Tommy absolutely refuse. They want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I've read.
Yeah,
I saw that.
he's still pushing that. He's still kind of he's doing it a little more gentler. If you follow him on Facebook, I don't know if he does his own posts, but he's very complimentary to to Tommy and JY. Like, oh, JY played a really great guitar solo on this song back then. Like, he's being really complimentary to them, or maybe trying to cool some of the ice that's
but they're not. But they're not returning the favor, though.
Yeah, they're not
at all.
They have a complete disdain for him. It's sad.
And maybe Dennis has a long-term plan. The only thing I can think of is that Dennis is priming the pump for the off chance they get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
If they get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that might be the only chance we would ever have to see them. And then maybe from there, maybe something can happen. But they're too invested in what they do. But kind of like when Bare Naked Ladies, they received a Canadian Career Award, and Stephen Page got on stage with Bare Naked Ladies for a couple songs, and then they parted ways again. And it was magical. It's on YouTube, that performance of them. I think maybe he's kind of angling for that of can we tolerate ourselves just if we get in? Maybe we can tolerate ourselves. You can tolerate me long enough. But those guys don't seem to have forgiveness in their hearts. They don't seem to be able to account that people may change. And
it's not impossible
for them to
get in, and it's not impossible for them to get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You've got some of those corporate rock bands getting in now, like Journey got in, Foreigner's getting in.
Yeah, Foreigner's getting in this year. So yeah, we're starting to see that. So let us know your thoughts about Grand Illusion. Let us know how you did on Three Lies and a Truth. We appreciate any type of communication. We will respond when possible, when technology allows us. And we appreciate you checking us out and coming in. New episodes come out every Thursday, so you can set your watch to that. We don't miss a beat ever. They'll always be there for you. So that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Eric is going to be on the comfy couch. I'm going to be on the hard green IKEA chair. Christopher Clark, thank you so much for joining us as always.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure lending your opinions to this, and I love the fact that you actually volunteer to jump in on episodes and then go listen to the album and check it out as well.
Yeah, well,
so I did.
I was going to say, no, like for me, it's like, this is like one of those ones I feel like I should have listened to long ago. So when you suggested it, I said, I'm down, because I like what I've heard from Styx. So like the fact that you gave me the opportunity was awesome. So thank you.
And was it mission accomplished, or?
I thought it was rad. I thought it was a really cool album. I really enjoyed it. I've been listening to it a lot.
First time Styx has ever been referred to as rad. You heard it here in the 3324 podcast. And he's not a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle either.
I am not, but that word was very ubiquitous when I was a kid. So
Cowabunga, man.
Rock and roll.
So for Chris, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will catch you on the flip side.